Have you ever felt like your own children are drifting away from you? Perhaps they've become distant or, worse yet, seem to disregard you entirely. You raised them with love, poured your heart into their upbringing. Yet now you're left questioning, what went wrong? The emotional weight can be overwhelming. But it's important to know that reacting impulsively, whether in anger or sadness, won't fix the situation. Instead, there are wise steps you can take to regain peace, dignity, and, yes, even respect. In this video, I'll share with you 8 transformative actions you can begin today. These aren't just suggestions, they are proven methods that many elderly parents have used to repair broken relationships with their children. Let's dive in and find out how you can take control and restore balance in your life. 1. Don't react in anger. Pause and reflect when we feel disrespected or hurt, especially by those we love the most. It's easy to let frustration take over. This can be particularly true when our children, who were once our closest companions, start to distance themselves or seem indifferent to our presence. The natural urge is to react, to confront them, perhaps even demand answers for the change in behavior. This emotional outburst may feel justified in the moment, but in truth, it only serves to escalate the conflict, deepening the hurt rather than solving it. Take a moment to think about figures like Nelson Mandela, a man who was imprisoned for 27 years but never allowed anger to take root in his heart. Mandela understood that responding with bitterness would only perpetuate the cycle of violence and oppression. Instead, he practiced restraint and reflection. Upon his release, he didn't demand vengeance but sought reconciliation, knowing that anger only exacerbates suffering. By refusing to react in anger, Mandela was able to navigate even the most complex and emotionally charged situations with dignity and wisdom. This is the core teaching of Buddhism, the idea that reacting impulsively out of anger or frustration only causes more harm, both to ourselves and to others. When we respond without reflecting, we become slaves to our emotions. And it's easy to say things we don't mean, which only complicates the situation further. It's not about suppressing our feelings, but about taking the necessary pause to reflect before we act. Let's consider a more relatable story of Mr. Tanaka, a retired teacher, who struggled with the distance he felt from his children. His children barely visited him, and when they did, the conversations felt strained, awkward even. One day, in a moment of frustration, Mr. Tanaka almost reached for the phone to call his son and express his frustration. But then, he took a step back. He went for a walk to clear his mind and reflect. During that walk, he realized that his worth wasn't dependent on his children's visits. His dignity came from within, and no external behavior could take that from him. By pausing and reflecting, Mr. Tanaka spared himself from making an impulsive decision that could have pushed his children further away. Instead, he gained a sense of clarity and peace, allowing him to approach the situation in a calmer, more composed manner. In everyday life, this is a lesson that can be applied to many situations. Whether you are dealing with your children, a colleague, or even a close friend, reacting in anger only clouds your judgment. The next time you feel disrespected, try pausing before you speak. Breathe. Reflect. In doing so, you give yourself the space to choose a response that aligns with your true values, not your fleeting emotions. This clarity will guide you to a more positive outcome, one rooted in peace rather than frustration. 2. Rebuild your own life. Find new purpose. When our children's attention begins to fade or they seem distant, it's natural to feel left behind or unimportant. The bond we once shared can begin to shift as they grow older. And in some cases, their focus may turn toward their own lives, leaving us feeling isolated or neglected. In such times, the temptation is to focus on this lack of attention and spiral into self-pity. However, the most empowering and transformative action we can take is to shift the focus back onto ourselves. Rather than waiting for external validation or affection, it's crucial to find new purpose and fulfillment within. A powerful example of this can be seen in the life of former First Lady Barbara Bush. Despite the heavy demands of her position in the public eye, Barbara Bush found time to focus on causes she deeply cared about, particularly literacy. She used her platform and resources to promote reading and education, a cause she championed long after her children grew up. Rather than letting her role as a mother define her entire identity, she created new purposes that brought joy and fulfillment. Becoming a strong, independent figure in her own right, her work became a testament to the power of reinvention, proving that we can all find a new path to explore, even later in life. This principle is beautifully demonstrated by Mrs. Elena, a woman who found herself alone after losing her husband. At first, she felt the absence of constant companionship, waiting by the phone, hoping for a call from her children. But instead of allowing this silence to consume her, she chose to redirect her energy into something new, gardening. She poured herself into learning about plants, cultivating her garden, and taking pride in the beauty she created. As time went on, gardening became a passion that not only gave her life new purpose but also filled her with a sense of accomplishment. Mrs. Elena's newfound purpose had a ripple effect on her relationships. Her children, who had once been distant, started to take notice. They saw their mother thriving, independent, and full of energy. Her garden became a symbol of her strength and resilience, qualities that were impossible to ignore. Instead of waiting for attention, she became a person worth admiring, a vibrant woman who embraced life on her own terms. In our own lives, finding a new passion or purpose can be equally transformative. Whether it's picking up a hobby, learning a new skill, or dedicating time to a cause you care about, refocusing your energy on something meaningful creates a sense of purpose that radiates outward. Not only does it enrich your own life, but it also becomes a beacon that draws others toward you. When we are aligned with our passions and live with intention, we become magnetic, especially to those we love. By filling our lives with purpose, we become more attractive to others, including our children, who will see us not as dependent or lost, but as strong, independent individuals leading fulfilling lives. 3. Communicate your feelings wisely. When we feel neglected or overlooked by our children, the natural instinct might be to confront them directly with frustration or anger. However, responding harshly rarely leads to resolution. Instead, it only adds to the emotional distance. Buddhism teaches us that harsh words or actions lead to more suffering, both for the speaker and the recipient. Words spoken in anger do not create understanding or connection, they deepen the divide. This is where the wisdom of measured communication becomes crucial. Consider the approach of someone like Prince Harry, a figure whose life has been deeply affected by the dynamics of family relationships. In his memoir, he shares personal reflections on the strained connections with his family, particularly his father and brother. However, instead of resorting to public outbursts or harsh accusations, Prince Harry often emphasizes the importance of clear and compassionate communication. This not only serves to express his feelings but also fosters a potential avenue for healing, even if the process is slow and difficult. His approach is a modern example of navigating family tension with an open heart, choosing words that reflect his pain while still leaving room for understanding and future dialogue. Mr. Peterson, an ordinary man dealing with a similar emotional dilemma, chose to communicate with his son in a way that reflected this principle. After months of silence and feeling ignored, instead of confronting his son angrily, Mr. Peterson took the time to write a letter. He didn't accuse or blame, but rather shared his feelings in a way that conveyed love and vulnerability. He wrote, "I miss our conversations. I'm proud of you. No matter what." In this simple yet powerful act of communication, he opened a door that had previously been closed. By expressing emotions without resentment, as Mr. Peterson did, we give others the opportunity to understand our perspective. Children may not always be aware of how their actions impact their parents. However, when we share our feelings with kindness, it allows them to see our hearts and, often, to recognize their own potential for growth and change. Communication becomes a tool for building bridges rather than walls. It's important to remember that vulnerability, when expressed thoughtfully, can invite empathy, while harshness only pushes people further away. This lesson can be applied to anyone in difficult relationships, not just parents and children. The ability to communicate thoughtfully and with compassion is key to maintaining connections, especially in situations where emotional wounds have been inflicted. 4. Set healthy boundaries. Respect is a two-way street. Setting healthy boundaries is a crucial aspect of maintaining balance and respect in any relationship, particularly in those between parents and children. Boundaries are not meant to create distance but to foster respect, and they are a reflection of how much we value ourselves. Without boundaries, it's easy to fall into a pattern of self-sacrifice, especially for parents who have invested so much time and energy into raising their children. Yet, it's important to understand that while love and care are essential, parents should not feel obligated to give at the expense of their own well-being. Take Mrs. Rosa, a retired nurse, as an example. Mrs. Rosa had always been there for her son, Daniel, dropping everything to support him whenever he called. However, over time, she realized that the relationship had become one-sided. Daniel only reached out when he needed something, and Mrs. Rosa's own needs and desires were being ignored. Eventually, she decided to set boundaries, something many people struggle with. Instead of automatically rushing to his aid, she calmly and respectfully told him, "I can't help today, I have plans for myself." By doing this, she wasn't rejecting him, she was teaching him to respect her time and energy. Setting boundaries is not about pushing others away, it's about communicating that your needs are just as important as theirs. This idea of mutual respect and boundaries is echoed by high-profile individuals, such as Oprah Winfrey. Despite her incredibly demanding career, Oprah is known for her ability to set boundaries with both her professional and personal relationships. She's spoken openly about the importance of saying no when necessary, especially to preserve her emotional and mental well-being. Oprah's example shows that setting boundaries doesn't diminish the love or respect one has for others. Instead, it reinforces the idea that healthy relationships are based on mutual consideration. When we set boundaries, we model self-respect, which teaches others how to treat us. If we allow ourselves to be continually drained by others without asserting our own needs, we inadvertently communicate that we don't value ourselves. In contrast, when we stand up for ourselves, we show others how to interact with us respectfully. Boundaries, therefore, are an essential part of any relationship, as they ensure that respect flows both ways. When we set healthy boundaries, we create an environment where both parties feel valued and supported. 5. Lead by example. Earn respect through your actions. Respect is not something that can be demanded or forced, it must be earned through consistent actions that demonstrate integrity and wisdom. If you want your children, or anyone for that matter, to show you respect, it's crucial to lead by example. This principle is true in both Stoic philosophy and Buddhist teachings, where the emphasis is placed on self-control, virtuous behavior, and mindfulness in every action. By embodying the qualities you wish to see in others, you naturally inspire them to mirror those behaviors. Consider Mr. Lorenzo, a grandfather in his 80s, who faced neglect and indifference from his adult children. Despite their emotional distance and lack of effort to connect with him, Mr. Lorenzo did not react with bitterness or resentment. Instead, he maintained a calm and compassionate demeanor, continuing to treat his children with kindness and respect, even when they did not reciprocate. His actions were a reflection of his deep understanding that respect is cultivated through consistent, positive behavior, not by demanding it from others. Over time, his children began to notice his unwavering kindness, and their feelings shifted from indifference to admiration. They returned to him, not out of guilt, but because they genuinely respected the way he had handled their neglect with grace. This story highlights the power of leading by example. Mr. Lorenzo's actions speak volumes about the strength of character and resilience. Similarly, influential figures like Nelson Mandela demonstrated this principle throughout his life. Despite enduring years of imprisonment and mistreatment, Mandela never responded with bitterness or hatred. Instead, he led with forgiveness and compassion, ultimately earning the respect of both his fellow countrymen and the international community. His example showed that respect is earned through patience, integrity, and the ability to rise above negative circumstances. In both Stoicism and Buddhism, the importance of self-mastery and virtuous action is central. Stoics believe that our reactions to external events are within our control and that we should focus on cultivating inner peace and virtue. Buddhism teaches that true wisdom comes from understanding the impermanence of all things, including the actions of others, and responding with mindfulness and compassion, leading by example, through virtuous actions, fosters an environment where respect is not only given but returned with sincerity. In practice, when we model respect through our actions, we communicate our values without saying a word. Our behavior teaches others how to treat us. And more importantly, it shows them how to treat themselves and others. The ultimate lesson here is that respect, much like love, is earned through the consistent demonstration of positive actions, and by leading with integrity, we inspire those around us to follow suit. 6. Stay financially independent. Financial independence is one of the most powerful tools for maintaining respect and dignity, particularly as we age. It's not about wealth for the sake of wealth, but rather about demonstrating self-sufficiency and strength. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, a retired couple, are a great example of this. They worked hard throughout their lives to manage their finances carefully, ensuring they never had to rely on their children for financial support. This independence wasn't just a practical matter, it was a source of immense respect. Their children saw them not as burdens, but as strong, capable individuals who had the ability to manage their own lives. This kind of respect doesn't come from obligation, it comes from admiration for their autonomy and wisdom. Being financially independent in old age is much more than a matter of money. It's a reflection of self-respect and dignity. When we are capable of taking care of ourselves, we send a powerful message to those around us. Especially our children, we value ourselves, and we are capable of managing our own lives. This sense of autonomy commands respect because it demonstrates that, even in our later years, we are not dependent on anyone else to meet our needs. It's a sign of maturity and wisdom that transcends mere financial security. Take a figure like Warren Buffett. For example, despite his immense wealth, Buffet has lived a modest and self-sufficient lifestyle. His financial independence and disciplined approach to money have earned him respect not just in the business world, but among his family as well. The respect he commands is not rooted in his wealth, but in the way he handles it with humility and integrity. He is an example of how financial independence, coupled with wisdom and restraint, can inspire respect from both peers and loved ones. Moreover, maintaining financial independence allows individuals to make their own decisions without the fear of becoming a burden on others. It frees them from the emotional weight of relying on their children or others for financial assistance, preserving both their dignity and their relationships. Children who see their parents managing their finances and living independently are more likely to view them as equals, not as people in need of care or charity. This dynamic fosters mutual respect and appreciation. In a broader sense, financial independence is a symbol of the larger concept of autonomy. When we are independent in this regard, we demonstrate that we are still active participants in our own lives, able to make choices, and maintain control over our futures. This not only protects our sense of self-worth but also encourages others, particularly our children, to honor and respect the lives we've built for ourselves. 7. Forgive but don't forget your worth. Forgiveness is often seen as a powerful tool for emotional healing, but it is essential to pair it with the understanding of your own worth. The story of Mrs. Evelyn, a retired artist, exemplifies how forgiveness can transform a painful situation without compromising one's dignity. Mrs. Evelyn faced rejection from her daughter, who distanced herself from her mother for reasons that remained unclear. Rather than allowing this rejection to consume her, Mrs. Evelyn made the choice to forgive her daughter. But more importantly, she did not let the rejection define her. Instead, she redirected her energy toward reclaiming her joy through her art and community involvement. Her story is a powerful reminder that forgiveness frees you from the grip of resentment and negative emotions. Holding on to bitterness only weighs us down, keeping us stuck in the past and unable to move forward. Forgiving others may allow us to heal, but it is crucial to understand that our sense of worth must come from within, not from how others treat us. Mrs. Evelyn didn't seek her daughter's approval or validation. She took the necessary steps to reclaim her own happiness and well-being. Through her art, she rediscovered a sense of purpose, which ultimately led to her daughter noticing the positive changes in her life. Mrs. Evelyn's story mirrors the wisdom taught by both Stoic philosophy and Buddhist principles. In Stoicism, we are reminded that we cannot control the actions of others, but we can control how we respond to them. The Stoics believe that our true worth comes from living virtuously and maintaining our inner peace, regardless of external circumstances. Similarly, Buddhism teaches that forgiveness is essential for freeing ourselves from suffering. But this act of forgiveness does not mean we should ignore our own self-worth. By forgiving others, we release ourselves from the bonds of anger and resentment. But we must still hold on to our dignity and sense of value. In the case of public figures, someone like Nelson Mandela stands as an example of how forgiveness can coexist with unwavering self-respect. After spending 27 years in prison, Mandela chose forgiveness over vengeance. However, he never lost sight of his own worth as a leader, advocate for justice, and a symbol of peace. His decision to forgive his oppressors did not mean he diminished his own sense of self, rather, it highlighted his strength and resilience. His ability to forgive others while maintaining his sense of purpose and dignity earned him respect not only from the world but also from his own people. When we forgive but do not forget our worth, we take control of our emotional well-being. Forgiveness should not come at the cost of self-respect. We are worthy of love, respect, and appreciation, regardless of how others choose to treat us. By forgiving, we clear the space for healing. But by holding on to our sense of self-worth, we protect ourselves from future harm. 8. Build a new circle of companionship. Loneliness, especially in the later years of life, can feel like an inescapable consequence of neglect. But it doesn't have to define one's existence. Mr. Harold, a widower in his 80s, felt the sting of abandonment from his children, whose visits and interactions grew fewer over time. Instead of waiting around for them to fill the emotional void in his life, he took control of his situation by joining a local seniors club. This decision opened the door to new friendships and meaningful activities that brought him joy, purpose, and a sense of belonging. Mr. Harold's experience demonstrates a crucial life lesson: relying solely on your children for emotional fulfillment can create an unhealthy dependency. It is natural for parents to expect emotional support from their children. But when that expectation is unmet, it can lead to feelings of isolation and disappointment. By choosing to build a new circle of companionship, Mr. Harold showed that it's possible to find happiness and fulfillment outside of the traditional family dynamic. His decision allowed him to enrich his own life, focusing on what he could control, his own social connections, and released the emotional burden of relying on his children to meet all his emotional needs. This insight resonates with the wisdom shared by well-known figures like Warren Buffett, who has always emphasized the importance of relationships and community in life. Though Buffett is known for his immense wealth, he frequently reminds people that true happiness stems from building strong, positive relationships, not from material success. His words speak to the idea that we must build our emotional and social well-being through genuine companionship, rather than relying on others who may not be able or willing to provide the connection we need. In Buddhist teachings, there is a principle of interdependence, which highlights the interconnectedness of all beings. The idea is that we are not isolated individuals, rather, our lives are enriched by the relationships and connections we form. However, while dependence on others can bring joy, it is equally important to create a life that does not rely on others for its core sense of fulfillment. By diversifying our sources of happiness, through friendships, hobbies, and community involvement, we maintain our emotional resilience and avoid the emotional void created by neglect. Building a new circle of companionship is not just about filling a gap, it's about enriching your life in a holistic way. When we focus on fostering relationships outside of our immediate family, we relieve some of the pressure on our children to serve as our sole emotional anchors. This, in turn, can lead to a more balanced relationship with them, where their love and support are appreciated, but not seen as the sole source of our well-being. In conclusion, by cultivating new friendships and support networks, like Mr. Harold did, we not only enhance our own lives but also improve our relationships with family members, making them healthier and more sustainable. The key is to embrace the opportunity for new connections and to release the expectation that others must fulfill all of our emotional needs. This balanced approach creates a more fulfilling life, regardless of how much attention or support we receive from our children. Navigating the complexities of relationships with our children as we age can be difficult, but it's entirely possible to regain peace, dignity, and respect by pausing to reflect, setting boundaries, and leading by example. You can rebuild a stronger, healthier connection with your children while still honoring your own needs and worth. Remember, your value is timeless, and you deserve to live with the respect and love you've always given. As you begin this journey, don't forget that small, intentional steps can lead to profound changes. Whether it's expressing your feelings, embracing new passions, or simply letting go of old hurts, the power to transform your relationships is in your hands. Your wisdom, kindness, and resilience are powerful tools. Use them to create the life and connections you truly deserve. Thank you for watching. If you're ready to embrace these insights, comment below with a 9. If you're just starting to reflect, comment a 0. Take care. And remember, you are worthy of all the love and respect life has to offer.